An ETF for such a large and liquid asset is only logical. You can see NASDAQ ETFs that are shorted 3 times because people trade or keep them. There's almost an exchange-traded fund ETF for anything you can think of, even terrible ideas. Thus, Bitcoin's status as an ETF is not surprising, plus it's already a part of the system. Naturally, it's beneficial to advise them to, grasp the real thing if at all possible. If you're unable to leave your brokerage, RIA or IRA, but would still like some price exposure, this could be a good option for you. However, in my opinion, its primary function is to provide a measure of legal protection. Plus, the lawsuit proved, among other things, that the government isn't a unified entity. As an example, the SEC has previously seen divisions between Gary and Pierce, as well as Cancer and Pierce. Even in this vote, the approval margin was close to 3-2. The intricate relationship between the sunk digital asset and conventional financial systems is the subject of Alden's investigation. Bitcoin ETF approval is only one example of how Bitcoin is becoming more mainstream in the financial sector. Alden talks about how this could legitimize Bitcoin and make it less volatile. She provides nuanced insights on Bitcoin's scalability within the broader economic landscape by considering both ambitious visions and practical challenges from a balanced perspective, discussing topics like its digital self-sovereignty, cryptocurrency governance, and adoption trends. This video delves into Alden's predictions for Bitcoin's future. We shed light on Bitcoin's present status and sketch out possible future development paths with our analysis. I believe there is a spectrum of results. Thus, I am not certain of the ultimate outcome in the far future. Money is a competitive good because it grows in value as a result of network effects. You should definitely keep the second best money for this. In most cases, you should go with option 1. When 2 currencies existed for an extended length of time in the past, it is typically because one currency was insufficient. Because gold was so valuable, even a single small coin would have bought more than a day's or week's worth of labor. Silver was a byproduct of its coexistence with gold. Consequently, the more compact units would be required. In light of that, it may have its limits in such a situation. I believe a major factor will be the ability of governments to defend their fiat currency bubble from the relentless Bitcoin push. For instance, developing nations that are struggling with inflation face the ever-present threat of dollarization, which is like a perpetual doorbell ringing in their ears. Those involved in the black market are after cash. Regardless, the accessible technology has allowed them to preserve their monopolies. In essence, they may secure their banks and entry points by erecting firewalls. That is where Bitcoin and stablecoins begin to make inroads. It stands to reason that as time goes on and more people learn about and use these kinds of technology, especially Bitcoin, it will be able to penetrate all of these things. The ability to control one's own currency is becoming more and more difficult to sustain. Unfortunately, we still don't have any information about when exactly they will be entirely rendered incapable of doing that, or to what degree. Therefore, I do not really have a firm opinion on whether you consider it a nearly exclusive financial asset or a very, very huge one on a worldwide scale. I have very high hopes for Bitcoin's potential, but I think there's still a long way to go. Like many others, I had been keeping an eye on Bitcoin for some time before I decided to invest in it. Thus, I had a period of interest mixed with skepticism, followed by an overabundance of interest and conviction. I see. I went through that change. Curiously, despite the scalability problems having been put out in 2009 and 2010, many people still seem to be perpetually startled by them. Even before Bitcoin was introduced, individuals were contesting the scaling in Satoshi's early emails, which can be found on the mailing list. They pondered, how can we make this scale? Alternatively, consider Finney's 2010 comments regarding Bitcoin banks. As a result, there's an old joke about how, in the first few years of Bitcoin's existence, Bitcoin discourse included pretty much anything you could possibly conceive of. Furthermore, this is yet another item that has been broached since, the very beginning of the chain. Personally, I experienced the upside when I went in, but I'm also aware of the disadvantage, which is that you can't buy Bitcoin for $10. However, one advantage is that there is a wealth of information accumulated over many years of individuals talking about this topic. So you can examine how things have worked and weigh the pros and disadvantages of various approaches. Therefore, I've always assumed that it will scale in layers. Additionally, the current financial structure appears to be multi-tiered. Here we have Fedwire as an example. It's the most important system for settling disputes in the United States. The Federal Reserve runs it. Every year they settle $1,000 trillion, or $1 quadrillion. They process nearly as many transactions per day as Bitcoin. So, on average, they complete 5 million transactions per year for a total of 200 million. The gross settlement amount is $1 quadrillion, which is an implausibly large sum. To be honest, I see you as playing a significant role in it. Custodial services are naturally easier to implement than non-custodial ones, but in general, you need an Apple like us to convince consumers to convert. That's the temptation, and it's constantly there. Therein lies the difficulty. Oh, it's just one of those things where people tend to be more motivated when they're facing a specific challenge. Yeah. Now you have an incentive to use Bitcoin if your payments have been blocked. Otherwise, you may be asking, what's the point? I see. On the other hand, if you're a citizen of the United States, you can buy things with dollars and then put those dollars back into the SOP. Even the lowest value of the dollar isn't a concern for you. So you're wondering what gives Bitcoin its significance. I can just put my money into the SUP 500. However, as you can see from looking around the globe, that is not an option for many. According to the Chain Analysis and Crypto Adoption Index, around 16 out of 20 nations are developed. This is because these nations tend to be tech-savvy, but also have very inflationary currency, which causes people to experience blockages and faster inflation. So for instance, Nigeria is about to be mentioned. Well, that's all. So for over 3 years, their central bank forbade banks from transferring funds to cryptocurrency exchanges. Despite this, they were ranked second for adoption. In particular, they dominated the peer-to-peer traffic category as that was how they were evading banks. In the face of, say, 15% inflation year after year, one quickly learns to adapt. Bitcoin is, in theory, accessible to anybody with a driver's license. It's as simple as acquiring the necessary knowledge and skills. But if you're not in need of it, it just seems like extra work. So, I suppose that's one thing. The other half is purely financial, I see. It may not be prudent to add $100 worth of Bitcoin to the chain due to the high fees, as you pointed out. This is particularly true when planning for the future. If the costs for adding something to the chain increase in the future, particularly if they have increased at a rate that is somewhat higher than the value of that Bitcoin, you may find yourself in a sticky situation. I mean, costs could go up to $30, and then you'd have $100 at Sodal. It's currently somewhat blocked. Users should exercise caution when doing so. Furthermore, I believe that lighting may be scaled so that power users can use it exclusively for non-custodial purposes. You can now access many payments with only one on-chain transaction. It may not scale in terms of the number of users, but it does so on a per-person basis. Next, we'll see what other layers emerge, such as Fediments and other technologies, as you mentioned. For instance, Covenant piques my attention. New information about the Mercury layer has emerged. It's not the only thing that can scale. Whatever takes off, we'll simply have to watch.